Hey guys, it's me Bo, back again on the Film Scene Investigation channel. I hope everyone is doing good. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing the controversial 1977 BBC drama, Scum. Before we get into it guys, if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing to the channel. All the support is greatly appreciated. So, Scum from 1977 was a BBC drama production directed by the late, great Alan Clark. Starring a host of young British talent, including Ray Winstone and Phil Daniels, the 75-minute drama was based on the screenplay by writer Roy Minton. Scum was filmed and completed awaiting transmission before subsequently being banned by the BBC for its very harsh and brutal depiction of Borstal life in Britain. Scenes of rape and suicide were all too much for the BBC to broadcast to its audience, thus they completely shelved it. The crazy thing is that it took a total of 14 years and the death of the director Alan Clark himself for the BBC to finally get round to broadcasting it in July of 1991. During those 14 years, Clark made a theatrical version of the film, which was released in 1979. The movie version stayed pretty close to the plot of the BBC version, with the same actors coming back reprising their roles, but this is the version that I will not be reviewing today. Instead, I'll be reviewing the original 1977 version today. I saw the 1977 version a few years back, and that was the version that really kind of got to me. So I've been meaning to review the 1977 version for a while now. Many online talk about the 1979 movie, but the 1977 original hardly gets mentioned. Although I think that's probably down to the fact that the 1979 version is widely available streaming on many different platforms, and the BBC version is still quite hard to come by. What pushed me into getting this review done was the recent passing of writer Roy Minton. He died earlier this year at the age of 90, and after hearing his death, I decided to prioritise this review and share my thoughts. So, in terms of the plot, it began with three young offenders, Carling, Angel and Davis, arriving at a Borstal in the east of England. From the start, we saw the youths being put in their place and ordered around very aggressively by the staff. Now, I know these kids were hoodlums and they'd been sent to Borstal for a reason. Still, the senior staff's behaviour towards them really felt unjustified, and it was practically bullying as soon as these young offenders stepped through the door. Carlin, played by a young Ray Winstone, was singled out specifically due to his history of violence towards members of staff. The senior officer, Mr. Sands, gave Carling a stern and vicious warning not to rock the boat or fall out of line. But the volatile staff were the least of Carling's worries, as he soon was attacked by another inmate called Banks, played by the actor John Blundell. Banks was a nasty piece of work, a big bully not to be messed with. He gave the orders, and he was not going to allow some young offender called Carlin coming in and moving in on his territory. So this all led to a vicious attack, a sneak attack basically, on Carlin while he was sleeping in his bed. Carlin was battered and bruised, and with the injuries so visible, he ended up getting in trouble, being brought before the governor and sentenced to 3 days in solitary confinement. I mean, yeah, the beating was so heinous. Yeah, there's no way that he could, put on makeup or hide his face. And obviously, that was one of the strict rules in Borstal: no fighting whatsoever. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing was very unfair. The fact that there was going to be no internal investigation, just simply black and white, you was fighting, you must be punished. It was clear from the get-go that the staff working in the Borstal did not have the inmates' best interests in mind. Upon his return to the wing, Carlin wasted no time in getting his revenge. He first took care of Banks's friend, Richard, who was played by actor Phil Daniels. Carlin got hold of some snooker balls, put 3 of them in a sock, and then basically whacked the living hell out of Richards. Yeah, it was a vicious attack, and you know, someone that plays snooker, those balls are hard, man. You wouldn't want someone whacking you over the face, you know, leaving you unconscious. Carlin would then go on to chase Banks into the upstairs toilets and beat him up too. You know, I can't say that I was cheering on the violence, but it was hard to feel sympathy for the Banks character, given he was the one that started all the trouble in the first place. Yeah, I mean, Carlin was taking no prisoners, and he made it very clear that he was the one now in control. Separately to the Carlin drama, we also saw the tragedy that unfolded with the character Davis, who was played by actor Martin Phillips. Unlike Carlin, Davis was bullied and picked on by the others, and yeah, never stood up for himself. In an environment like a Borstal, or a prison for that matter, those who don't fight back only encourage the others to join in with the bullying. I mean, you're pretty much the main target until you do something about it. So, towards the end of the film, we saw Davis working in a greenhouse with some other inmates. Out of nowhere, he was suddenly attacked from behind and ended up being savagely raped by these 2 boys. To make matters worse, the senior officer, Mr. Sands, was witness to this sadistic rape that was going on in the greenhouse, yet he just turned a blind eye and walked away. You witness someone being raped and you don't do anything to help them, to call for help. You just walk away, turn a blind eye, and allow that sick punishment to continue. I mean, wow. I don't know, just an evil scumbag character Mr. Sands was. And yeah, if you didn't hate him already, you definitely hated him now. The whole Davis rape scene in the greenhouse was, yeah, it was very difficult to watch. And I'll be honest with you, it's kind of disgusted me as well. Credit has to be given to director Alan Clark for delivering such a harrowing sequence of events. I mean, ultimately, that was his intention, and he pulled it off very well. Later that night, completely distraught over his ordeal, Davis decided to cut his own wrists as a cry for help, but ultimately killed himself in the process. It was a horrific scene with blood everywhere, him crying out for help, and the staff just, yeah, not caring about him, not caring about his well-being, and just left him there to bleed to death. It was one horrific scene after another at this point, and I'll be honest with you, at this point towards the end of the film, I was kind of like, you know, can we end this now? Because I don't know what's going on, but this is just getting harder and harder to watch. I mean, the Davis character was this shy, quiet boy that didn't want to rustle any feathers, yet no matter what he did, bullies just wanted to take advantage. Davis's dead body was found the next day by the wardens, and the death itself would go on to spark a riot in the dinner hall after the youths refused to eat. Carlin was the one that instigated the riot by him throwing his food up against the wall. Suddenly you had everyone standing up, throwing chairs, flipping tables, and all the officers standing around having no control. The boys had had enough, and they were lashing out in anger towards the officers and their behaviour. I mean, yeah, it was a chaotic end to a very vicious portrayal of Borstal life. You know, when it comes to Ray Winstone, I have to say he did a wonderful job as Carlin, especially given the limited acting experience the actor had at the time. While the actor has somewhat of a limited range, he was perfect for the role as Carlin. The director, Alan Clark, gave a young Ray Winstone an opportunity because he saw the potential in him. And Clark was right, as Winstone went on to have a long career in the movie industry. And, you know, talking of Carlin, I wanted to mention one of the major significant differences this version had compared to the theatrical 1979 version. So, in the original BBC version, the Carlin character was secretly gay and pursued a relationship with an effeminate inmate. Early on in the film, after Banks had been taken out, Mr. Goodyear, the housing officer, gave Carlin a single cell to himself in exchange for Carlin's help to maintain order in the wing. Once Carlin had his own cell to himself, he then sought to find his own personal cellmate. You know, I found the whole thing very intriguing, and credit to the writer Roy Minton for including this gay subplot into his original screenplay. I mean, let's face it, these gay relationships in such places like a Borstal or a prison do in fact take place. It's common practice, and so I appreciated Minton for not shying away from that aspect in his material. And yeah, I do wonder why Carlin's sexuality was never carried over to the big screen version in 1979. I felt it was a very important subplot and gave the Carlin character kind of more layers of complexity, yet by cutting it out of the 1979 version, it kind of took away some of the weight and impact the BBC version had. Another difference the BBC version had compared to the 1979 theatrical version was the casting of David Trelfall, who played the character Archer. You know, for me, David Trelfall's portrayal as Archer was perhaps one of the most compelling parts of the drama. Archer was one of the inmates Carlin met when he started working in the laundry room. Unlike a lot of the other inmates in the Borstal, Archer had a brain, he had an opinion, and he wasn't afraid to share it. He had complete disdain for the justice system, and at every opportunity tried to make life difficult for the guards. Now, I must say, I really did like the character Archer, and specifically Trelfall's portrayal, as he stood out among the rest of the inmates as this smug, know-it-all intellectual who told things like they were. No lies, no sucking up to the authority, just plain, harsh truth. Now, in the 1979 movie version of Scum, the actor Mick Ward took over the role as Archer. And while I thought Ward did a decent job, I did prefer Trelfall's depiction of the character. Trelfall had more of an ordinary look and feel about him compared to Mick Ward. Trelfall didn't look out of place being in a Borstal the way he looked and acted, even down to the small mannerisms. Yeah, in the 1977 version, Trelfall is a real highlight, and yeah, it's a real shame that he never returned for the movie version in 1979. And so, dislikes for Scum 1977. My main dislike for the movie would actually be the song that played during the end credits. So the final scene takes place the the young offenders and the prison guards are lined up outside the borstal, paying respects to the character Davis, who had obviously just died. It was a very sombre and bleak end to the movie, but then the end credits rolled, and to my surprise, this hokey generic music taken from one of the BBC's music libraries was tagged on. Now, some will say that this is very trivial, who really cares? But for me, I was genuinely disappointed. Now, if you've watched any of Alan Clarke's material like I have, you'll know that Clarke rarely used any music in his end credit sequences. Most of the time, the credits would just roll down the screen without any music, completely silent, heightening the mood and atmosphere of the material. So when it came to the BBC version of Scum, I assumed once again that the credits would appear in silence. But yeah, I was wrong, and the song itself that they tagged on didn't complement the film in any way, shape or form. I thought it was a poor decision, and it would have been so much better had they just not had any music whatsoever. I mean, the whole 75 minutes of this BBC drama was not accompanied by some haunting soundtrack. There was little to no music whatsoever that was used, and then suddenly at the very end you hear this generic piece of music during the credits, which it was just really jarring for me. I just hated it. Knowing his track record, I can't imagine this was a decision made by Alan Clarke. And separately, in the 1979 theatrical version, this was corrected when the credits rolled and there was no music whatsoever. I mean, yeah, it's a small thing. I'm sure some people watching this will be like, oh, who cares, man, it's just a song. I get it, but it just was so eerie, silent leading up to the end credits that once they tagged this music on, it just threw me, and just wish it had not been included in the first place. And so, ratings for Scum 1977. I'm going to be rating this BBC drama a strong 8 out of 10. When it comes to Alan Clarke, this original 1977 drama is arguably one of his strongest works in his filmography. Scum offered this raw and intense viewpoint of borstal life that was plagued by violence and corruption. It was an important story, and once Alan Clarke found out that his drama wasn't going to be broadcast to the nation, he decided to go it alone and make his own film based on the same screenplay. When I take a step back and look at both the 77 version and the 1979 version, honestly, I would say that the BBC original is the superior version that I recommend. For me, the 1977 version carried this very raw and bleak atmosphere to it, while the 1979 movie still retained a lot of the same tone, but it was a little bit too polished for me. Obviously, there was a significant difference in the production budget for both projects, and it showed. I mean, at times, the BBC version felt like a off-the-wall documentary based on borstal life, whereas the 1979 film felt like a movie production set in a borstal. Given how woke and bland the BBC are nowadays, it's not surprising that they got cold feet before Scum could be broadcast. I mean, it was a terrible idea by the BBC, one of many that they've made over the years, and I'm just glad that the original 77 version did finally get to be broadcast, even though it was 14 years late. I know the 1979 version of Scum is widely available, and I believe it's actually free to view on YouTube, whereas the BBC version is not streaming anywhere, and it's very, very hard to come by. Still, if you're able to get your hands on the 1977 version, by all means, watch it, because in my eyes, it's the better of the two.